My husband and I had tried for almost 3 years to become pregnant when we were finally blessed. At 12 weeks, we received the Omphalocele diagnosis, and shortly after that, we discovered we would be having a beautiful baby girl. Although there was so much unknown as to what would happen when she arrived, we held tightly to our faith to get us through those difficult months. And true to her character, she made her own plan and decided to arrive at 36 weeks and 6 days at Winnie Palmer Hospital, just 4 days shy of her scheduled C-section. Here is her story. I came into this world on May 24th, 2014 via C-section 3 weeks early. I weighed 5 pounds 15 ounces, was 17 3/4 inches long, and was born with a giant omphalocele. After quick visits with Mommy and Daddy, I was taken to the NICU so the team could properly take care of me. They initially decided to try the paint and wait method as everything looked stable and I was breathing room air with no issues. I was just 6 days old when Dr. Levy said I should have my very first surgery. He thought that there was a possible leak from the sac protecting my organs. So he developed and drew up pictures of the technique he would use on me the night before surgery. The contraption, as everyone called it, was essentially a silo that held all the contents of my omphalocele, with bolsters and sutures placed over and around my omphalocele. They would come to see me every day, or as often as my body could handle it for them to tighten the sutures. The goal was to stretch the skin slowly and gently push the organs inside my abdomen. The results were immediate. After a few weeks, we finished with the contraption, and I was taken for my second surgery to have a central Broviac IV line placed and a dissolvable mesh and wound vac placed over my omphalocele in hopes that my skin would grow together. With lots of prayers, the wound vac did its magic, and my skin started growing together just as Dr. Levy wanted it to. However, I started to get sick quite often, and I would get lots of fevers. They had to take me for my third surgery to open up the mesh and clean out my abdomen. They discovered that I had a very large abscess, and also had a couple perforations in my bowels, which were leaking stool into my abdomen, causing the abscess. They cleaned me all out and placed some drains. They took the drains out eventually and started doing a wet to dry dressing, which did wonders to help heal the skin that was growing over my omphalocele. It was also discovered after I was born that I had a very large VSD. This is a ventricular septal defect, or a hole between the heart's two ventricles. Doctors thought that it could possibly close up on its own, but after a couple months it didn't, so it was determined that I would have to go in for open heart surgery. They waited until I was 4 months old to schedule this, so that my omphalocele would have as much skin covering it as possible. They also needed to wait for me to improve my breathing. Because I had several surgeries for my omphalocele, and my organs were pushing up on my underdeveloped lungs, I was intubated and on a ventilator for a few months. My lungs needed to be able to breathe more on their own without so much support. On September 30th, almost exactly 1 week after I turned 4 months old, I went in for my open heart surgery. During surgery, they discovered it was a little more in-depth than they previously thought. I actually had several heart defects, which altogether are classified as tetralogy of Fallot. They repaired my heart, and I was again intubated for another couple weeks. After my heart was fixed and I was finally taken off the ventilator, I improved dramatically. I was able to be weaned off oxygen support within the next few weeks. The only thing at that point standing in my way of going home with Mommy and Daddy was my eating. I had always been fed through a feeding tube, and by the time I was off oxygen support, enough to where I could eat orally instead of through the feeding tube, I was already 5 months old and I had developed a severe oral aversion from always having a tube down my throat. Anytime somebody would try to put anything near my mouth, it would make me gag. My parents finally made the decision with the doctor to go ahead and have a G-tube placed and a Nissen done. This was my 5th surgery, all before I turned 6 months old. Just 5 days after that surgery, 2 days after turning 6 months old, and 1 day before Thanksgiving, I finally went home with my family for the very first time. Little did my parents know that I had caught a cold just before leaving the hospital. My first week home was so stressful. I wasn't feeling well, and I had to adjust to a completely different life than I was used to. Exactly 1 week after coming home, the cold had gotten the better of me, and I went into respiratory failure. My parents rushed me to the emergency room, and I had to be intubated once again. I spent another 19 days in the hospital recovering from a cold and battling pulmonary hypertension because of it. Once again, I was able to go home just 2 days before Christmas Eve when I turned 7 months old. But this time, they sent me home on oxygen. Ever since then, life has been filled with love, family, doctor's appointments with cardiology, pulmonology, and gastroenterology, and therapies with PT, OT, and speech. I'm now 4.5 years old, and I'm doing fantastic. I'm still 100% fed through my G-tube, but I'm no longer on any oxygen medications. I have a huge personality, I'm loving life, and most importantly, I'm thriving.
My name is Rosie, and I am a Omphalocele warrior.